Hi, welcome back to the Woo and Science Podcast, episode 2. Today, we're going to be talking about dysautonomia and POTS, the invisible battle. I'm Dr. Meaghan Longyear, and this is my husband, Dr. Michael Longyear, and we'll be back with you in just a few seconds.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Woo and Science Podcast. This is a topic that has been really popular on social media lately. And I really think with, long COVID symptoms and some of that stuff, it's really been something that's in the literature as well. So science is really focusing on this topic of dysautonomia and POTS and the invisible battle. And the invisible battle, I think, fits with a lot of the topics that we will talk about as we go, because a lot of times we always use this example, and I've used it for years with concussions and head injuries. Everybody knows if you break your arm and you have a cast on your arm that you're going through something, right? Mm-hmm. But when we talk about things like mental health or concussions or this dysautonomia and POTS idea, which we'll unravel here as we go, or even like multiple chemical sensitivities, it's happening inside your head. And it doesn't mean it's all in your head, which is what we get a lot of patients that come in and their doctors tell them, but it's happening in your brain and there's no cast there. There's not an outward way for you to express that you're hurting or not feeling well that is socially acceptable, if I can use that terminology. So the invisible battle is this idea is that it's something kind of raging within that's hard for other people to see the signs and symptoms of. But when we look at long COVID, there was an interesting quote in the Dysautonomia Association of America, and she actually said that dysautonomia and POTS, they expected a 50% increase in cases as a result of COVID and long COVID type symptoms because they mimic each other. And so as we dive into this, I'll give just a kind of basic understanding of what this is. So a lot of people have heard of like fight or flight by this point, or a lot of docs will say running from a tiger is always the phrase. There's not a lot of tigers in America, but for some reason we use that as our example of what stress is. But you've got a gas and a brake to your nervous system. And it's known as the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight system. That's the one that does things like responds to stressors. And the parasympathetic nervous system is what we refer to as rest, digest, and rebuild. And that's the other side of it. So we say the gas and the brake, or the fight or flight system, or the rest and digest system. That's really what we're talking about. And the default for this system is that you're in fight or flight. And that's an important distinction to make here, because as we unfold this, I think it's going to make a lot of sense. And the reason you're in fight or flight is when you're a baby and you're born, you got to fight for everything, right? You have mom and dad to protect you and those types of things, but your system, your brain doesn't necessarily know that. So your default system is that sympathetic nervous system. As we grow a brain, and specifically as we grow the front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, we start to dampen and control that system. So you'll hear people talk about sympathetic dominance, and I kind of hate that term. And I have a few friends that I go back and forth with on this one, because it's not sympathetic dominance. Because if it was dominant sympathetic or fight or flight, the treatment would be to sit back and relax, and then everything would be good. The reality is sitting around or resting too much is actually detrimental to that system. And so I use the term often, or the phrase often, health is an active process. You have to actively engage your parasympathetic nervous system to better dampen or control the sympathetic. So when we use sympathetic terms here, when we talk about it, especially with dysautonomia and POTS, we talk about it in the sense of there's sympathetic escape. And so your sympathetic nervous system is escaping because your brain and your nervous system isn't strong enough to gate it or control it.
And a big piece of that, when we talk about our sympathetic, and yes, I get that little smile every time I'm about to jump into some emotions, and our thought reality. I think it would be a fair thing to say, and I think most people listening would agree, that we live in a very, very stressful lifestyle. Whether you have children, or you have demands at work, or you have fill in the blank, but there are so many things that we are stressed with Now, maybe back in the day, we didn't have quite as many stresses. We still had children that we were raising and grocery shopping that had to be done and deadlines to meet at work. But now we have all of this instant stuff. Our phones are constantly dinging, constantly reminding us of things that we have to do. Even when it's something like Facebook, somebody commented on your post, I have to have this urgency that I have to look at this. I have to go and get this done. It's a task that's incomplete. So we always feel like we have these things that we have to do, have to do, have to do. So when we're seeing a lot of these people that are coming in and it's, they list off all these symptoms that they're having and all these things that are going on. And when I, a lot of times when I'm in the room with them and I ask them, well, how does your stress level feel? Like, how do your emotions feel? All I have to say is that, and boom, into tears. People are just like, I am so overwhelmed. I can't keep up with everything. I can't do all the stuff, but I have to for work and my family and my children and, my aging parents, whatever it may be. So when we're constantly hitting that gas pedal, we're constantly driving ourselves that we have all these things to do. We're driving ourselves out of more of that stress brain. So we're more in that place of I have to get it done or I'm not meeting expectations. I have to get things done or I'm failing. I have to get things done, fill in the blank, whatever. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. And these are the things that I see a lot of the patients that come in, that we work with that are saying these things. These are the emotional stresses that they're feeling. When in reality, when we think in that higher brain, you're not a failure because you can't get everything done. You're not superhuman. Nobody is. But we have these expectations that we put on ourselves. And after years of pushing ourselves, whether that be through, the school program that you were in, and now you're starting up, like we both did when we got out of school, and it was like, boom, jumping right into starting a practice. There's just no downtime to allow your body to just kind of regather your energy, because we all have a certain amount of energy that, energy cannot be destroyed or created. We have what we have. When you keep driving it, you're exhausting, your cells, you're exhausting your body. So when we talk about that, driving that system and not finding that time to, get into more of the parasympathetic, it creates this imbalance, this dysfunction in the way the systems are supposed to be, functioning in a normal, healthy person.
Yeah. And I think, as we look at this system, what she's talking about is that limbic brain, right? That emotional kind of regulation. Your limbic brain is part of your primitive brain, really. And it's part of what does just survival mode. And so when we get stuck in this, what you'll hear in the research or in the literature is a term called amygdala hijacking. And it's because there's a little part of your brain called the amygdala, and it's about the size and shape of an almond, actually. And it was funny, when I was learning anatomy before Dr. Meg went to school, I had this anatomy app. And when you were looking through the brain, and it was a 3D brain that you could kind of rotate and look at, the amygdalas were these little blue things. And when I learned it, they look like these little blue almonds as you're looking at it. And so I was showing her what it was. And so one thing too is the female brain stresses more than the male brain. And I'll get to that in a second. But when I was showing her, it was like these little blue almonds. She's like, well, can't they just take out my little blue things? So
now this was prior to NET. I had never experienced neuroemotional techniques. So those little buddies were working overtime most of the time in my world.
Yeah. And so what amygdala hijacking means is those little blue things actually hijack blood and resources. And again, your default system is that sympathetic, because your sympathetic system will keep you safe. For those of you who are moms or dads out there, you might notice that your baby's resting heart rate is normally like 100 to 120. If you feel their little pulse on their wrist or on their neck, it's going to be super fast, because your higher heart rate is more around that survival system. It isn't till we become older and we start to grow the prefrontal cortex, which doesn't fully form until age 25, that we really start to dampen this sympathetic system and have the ability to shut off that amygdala hijacking or that wiring. So, but when you're in that amygdala hijacking or that amygdala escape, your body is more worried about everything in your environment. So now everything becomes a stressor that maybe wouldn't have been in the past. Like light can actually become a stressor. We refer to dysautonomia and POTS as kind of a garbage can diagnosis, because there's so many symptoms that you could pretty much give anybody the diagnosis of dysautonomia. And I kind of have a joke, not a joke, but a true statement in our office is females that come in are dysautonomic until proven otherwise. most of our patients, when they come in, especially females, they have some amount of dizziness when they go from lying down to standing. And they just think that's normal. They're like, oh yeah, I just get a little dizzy for a second. It just takes me for a minute to come back online. And I'm like, that's not normal, right? But it is their normal, and it's happened to them, and it probably happened to their mom. And so we kind of accept some of this stuff like excessive sweating or dizziness or even a little bit of blurry vision or brain fog as normal. But that's a sign and a symptom that your autonomic nervous system, or the gas and the brake, are dysregulated in a lot of ways.
And a lot of times we ignore these things that start happening earlier on until you literally hit the wall and it's like, now I can't function. And that's where we get a lot of people that come in that my blood pressure's way through the roof, or my heart rate's, skyrocketing when I'm just sitting there on the couch, just hanging out with my family. Inappropriate times that these things are happening. So a lot of times we can kind of start to pick up on some of these little clues. Again, the body will communicate with you. It'll tell you things. We just get so wrapped up in the things that we're doing just to literally survive the day. We've got to get all these things done, our checklist, our to-do list. We have to pick up the kids, get them to the sports, get them to this, get to this meeting, make sure I don't miss that. That's our lifestyle. So when we just keep driving like that and our body's telling us, oh, like we talked about in the first episode, my back pain, or I'm starting to get dizzy when I, get out of a chair, or I get up from laying down, or all of a sudden my heart rate's, kind of resting around in the 90s. Things like that are clues that the body is starting, waving this little flag here. I need some help. Pay attention to me. I'm trying to show you that we're not functioning optimally. And if we keep going that way, that's when we get to this place of, people coming in like, I don't know what to do. I mean, I know you're the literature guy, so you're the one looking at all this stuff. But what I hear from a lot of the patients that come in when they have been to their medical doctors and stuff is that they don't really know what to do for POTS. They don't have answers for them. And that just shows that this is something that's, creeping up on all of us, and people are showing up with different symptoms, but yet having a lot of the same kinds of, unwanted functions that, the high blood pressure, the dizziness, the gut issues, the brain fog, the irritability, all of these things. There isn't just a one fix answer for that. What we need to do is really get those systems back on track, back in gear. But a lot of that comes with regulating the stress that's going on in your life and the thought processes. I'm always going to bring it back to an emotion.
I know.
But there's always
those messy things, those messy emotions again. Right?
And I guess in this perspective, when we look at it, yes, it makes a mess of our lives, because it's not, we don't want to feel this way. We don't want to be struggling this way. But in that same respect, we can't keep doing the same things that we're doing and expecting different results. So paying attention and seeing, okay, I'm noticing that I'm feeling this way. This isn't normal. This isn't that there's something going on. Listen to your body when it's saying that, because you could start doing things early on, getting into better routines and better habits, and then, control these symptoms, maybe stop it before it progresses into something that now is debilitated, and your body physically won't let you do the things that you need to do because it just doesn't have any more to give in those situations.
Yeah. And so your body can get ramped up in all of these and start to see everything as an attack, right? Mm-hmm. And the female brain is more apt to go here. And I would just touch on this for a second. The male brain and the female brain are different. The female brain is typically more coming from the right side. It's more serotonin dependent, whereas the male brain is more dopaminergic or dopamine dependent and comes more from the left side. So the male brain does better with schedules. The left brain also worries about things in the past. That's why guys are the ones that typically have the midlife crisis and buy the Porsche, because they, regret some of the things that they did in the past. Whereas the female brain is more worried about the future. And that's what anxiety is. Somebody once told me the definition of an anxiety is worrying about something that might never actually happen. So as we look at that, the female brain is much more prone to that. I kind of call POTS and dysautonomia like supermom disease. And that's a lot of what we do in the office. Is you get these moms who take on everything. They take on the world for their kids, their parents, their husband. Mm-hmm. And we call the husbands kind of like the third kid, right? Or the other kid. Guys, we never really get past the age of 5. But they kind of drive into the brain because they're always worried about everything that is coming and that could possibly come. And they're working out all of these scenarios, right? So the female brain is much more prone to this. And that's why we always say the female patients have dysautonomia until proven otherwise. And it wasn't so long ago, guys, and to be honest with you, there's still some docs that do this. Females only have one disease, and that's anxiety. They'll go to the doctor with dizziness, headaches, brain fog, all of these things. And 9 times out of 10, the medical doctor is going to prescribe them an antidepressant or an anti-anxiolytic. And it's not that, it's something else. There's a reason that they're having that stress. So they might dampen the symptom with that drug for a little while, but at the end of the day, it's not doing anything. And that's why, like in our office, we take a more active approach to that. So like with Dr. Meg, she's always going to look at those scary things that are called emotions that are just messy and dirty. And I'm going to be more on the active side of care. So movement is life. And perfect movement, we can get to perfect life. So we're very specific in how we have you move your body or do some of those things, because you have to do, guys, I hate to admit it, we have to deal with the emotions as much as I don't want to, and I'll ignore that or avoid it as long as possible. We do have to do those, but we've also got to move. We got to get up out of the chair. We have to actively engage our health, right? So for me, I'm not good with the emotions part, but how can people kind of handle their emotions as they go through the day?
Well, and that's the part that what I love what we do here in the office and what we've kind of crafted together because of how different we are. With the movement, there's a lot of patients that come in that are very movement based. They run, they work out, they do all of these movement things, but they're not addressing the deeper parts. So if we're not in that limbic brain, so when I refer to the deeper parts, those more survival parts of our brain. So a lot of times our patients will have, comments that the doctor told me, well, it's just all in my head. And whereas like Dr. Mike started, the conversation on this podcast about that, it is in our head because it is the emotional brain that's driving how we're reacting. So we've got to address that piece too. Yes, movement is so important. We know exercise is so important. And that's where Dr. Mike comes in a lot with the treatments we do here in the office, is getting you moving, working those higher parts of your brain. Whereas I'm going to work a little bit more on decreasing those stress, the issues that we hold in our tissues, the past things that we haven't completely gotten through. Our brain's still kind of wrapped up around them. If you watched our first podcast, my favorite thing to refer to is limbic loops. We get that part of our brains just driving. We need to release those. We need to work through those. And that's why a lot of the technique that we use mostly in our office is neuroemotional technique. And with that technique, it's a quick way of that chiropractors will use, a lot of mental health doctors use, to get to what stresses are really driving you right now and allowing you in a safe place to let that go. Then we're going to go drive your brain in ways to move your body and increase different neurotransmitters and balance things out so that your body can get back. It knows what to do. It just needs help getting out of this stuck pattern and moving into more of a balance in a healthy way. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. There's lots of other techniques out there that I know a lot of people that they use to help with the emotional stress, but it's a piece that is just so important that I think a lot of people kind of skip over, because a lot of people agree with Dr. Mike about the mental health part of it. And I don't want to think about emotions and they're messy and they're not, but we have to address that kind of stuff in order to move forward and, really have a change on our brain health.
So what's something that they can do in real time if they're having an emotional day and dealing with those things?
So we have what we call the FAST technique. There'll be a link that pops up below so that you can check into. The FAST technique is it'll show you on a video on there as well, but you will hold on to different points, meridian points on your wrist, and then place your hand over your forehead where our emotional points are. And we hold on to these points here while we're in that feeling. So it's bringing the mind and the body. So that feeling that you're feeling, you're getting your heart rates up, you feel yourself getting, emotional, you feel all the tension in your body, your stomach starts to hurt. So by bringing the points on our, and we won't go into too much detail, the technique and the link that we'll have below will give a little bit more detail on that. But by holding these together, going back and forth from hand to hand, we also have another video on our YouTube channel that you can check out where I describe this a little bit more in detail. Helps you in that moment of what you're feeling, breathing deep belly breaths, allowing yourself to feel where you're at, And then when you feel it kind of subside a little bit, now get up and go for a walk. Move your body. Do something engaging and activate those higher parts of the brain now with the movement like Dr. Mike was talking about.
Yeah, so those are great. That's a great way to kind of attack it in the moment, right? And it looks weird kind of doing that. So a lot of times we tell, because we have kids that use this, and we'll have them duck into the bathroom and use a stall to kind of be in that place. Or you can do that in your car, right? But finding places to take the time to do that. And then on the other side, activating the prefrontal cortex or engaging that front part of the brain. Things like creativity are great. Coloring books are great, but those little adult coloring books can sometimes actually be more stress inducing. But coloring something or being creative, whatever your creative is, right? I have zero artistic ability. People look at my stick men and they're like, wait, what is that? So for me, creating is woodworking and using my hands. And because exercise is something that, to be honest, with really severe POTS and dysautonomia, you can't, because you get really fatigued or really tired or you get dizzy when you do it. So exercise in the beginning might look like gargling, which is a great vagal nerve activity or vagus nerve exercise, which is the biggest nerve or branch of that parasympathetic system. Something like gargling or humming along to your favorite song or singing is a great way to engage that brain. For females, getting out, we always say the legs should move as much as this does. Females need to talk out things and be able to talk and solve the world's problems with a friend. Males, they're more dopaminergic. We have more testosterone. We might need to go throw some weights around or do something that's more physical with no talking. Right? We want to be quiet and maybe go fishing, do something completely mindless for a little while. So those are ways that we can engage that parasympathetic system and, more importantly, engage that prefrontal, get creative, and kind of drive into those types of systems. Because again, it's more feminine or more female in this disease process, but males are suffering with it too. And especially with long COVID, we're seeing more and more of that. And, I really want to, as we kind of wrap this, I want the thought to take away from this is health is an active process. Even that rest, digest, and rebuild system is active. We need to actively engage that. So be careful with that piece. Make sure, take time to rest. And there, you do have to Netflix and chill. And I know Netflix and chill doesn't mean what I think it does or how I'm using it right now, but we need to be able to sit back and relax. But we also need to take time to actively engage that parasympathetic, listen to some music, gargle, hum, sing, and engage in some creative activities. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.